Just a quick one on inverters. Previous video, living off the grid, discussing inverters, and just going to go over the quasi sine wave or sine wave inverter debacle. If you don't know what I'm talking about, basically a quasi sine wave inverter gives you a square wave rather than a perfect smooth wave. Right, there's a lot of fuffle about, do you need perfect sine wave, do you not need perfect sine wave? Right, well my answer is this: you do not need sine wave, and I'll show you why in a minute. But the reason people say you need perfect sine wave is that it gives a nice smooth current and there's no, there's no problems that way. And they say lots of devices don't work off quasi sine wave. Truly, that's complete rubbish. Quasi sine wave these days is so good, you don't need anything better. Now, a pure sine wave inverter is less efficient, because what it does is it has to do so much more converting. Rather than just make a square wave, so if you imagine, if it's a quasi sine wave, sorry, I know I'm shaking my camera. If you imagine a quasi sine wave goes power up, power on, power down to negative, power across like that. Whereas a sine wave has to do this. So it has to digitally create that waveform. So it's much more efficient as a quasi. Now everyone says, oh, this stuff doesn't work. You can't run 240 volt stuff off this. Yeah, you can. Let's talk about it, shall we? LCD TV. Currently, embarrassingly, watching Hell on Wheels. Anyway, so this is a LCD TV. It has no issues. It operates exactly as it normally would. This is a DVD player, works fine. All my charging devices work fine. Even charging my speaker systems work fine. There is you would not ever notice. This is a big oil boiler with all its control box functions in here. There's its little control box. Yeah, you wouldn't even know you're on quasi sine wave. The only indication I've got that I'm on quasi sine wave and not on sine wave is when I run the pump for the system, the central heating pump for the system. So if you listen, sorry, do you hear the hum now? Little bit of a hum. Off, on. That's the only indication there is that I'm on sine wave. I'm on quasi sine wave and not on sine wave. And if I went and bought myself an alpha pump, which is one of the new A-rated pumps, which I should buy anyway, which is a DC permanent magnet motor, you wouldn't hear anything at all. So I've got a cheaper inverter than a sine wave. I've got a more efficient inverter than a sine wave. I've got a stronger inverter than a sine wave. And nothing doesn't work. Nothing. There's nothing I've plugged my Kempe inverter MIG welder into this system. Yes, set at a low ampage because I've only got a kilowatt inverter. I've plugged that into it, and that is one of the most finicky pieces of equipment you'll ever find. Doesn't even notice. Nothing notices. Why would they sell them if they wouldn't work? Quasi sine is cheaper, more efficient, easier to use, and the only thing that's going to make a noise, only thing that's going to hum, are old-fashioned central heating pumps. That's all there is. There's nothing you could plug into this that wouldn't operate. I'm trying to think of other things I've plugged in that are even more finicky. I mean, all the TVs I've had, everything. By the way, it's not worth going with a 12 volt TV because they're massively expensive and really not all that efficient. No, everyone whinges about lines on the telly. There aren't any lines on the telly. I've had loads of tellies because I keep breaking them. There's no lines on the telly. There's no issues with the DVD player. There's no issues with radio. The only thing I would say, actually, there is one thing that a quasi sine wave inverter, they will tell you it does, which is this, which is that your DAB radio won't operate when it's switched on. That's true. But if you switch on your sine wave inverter, your DAB radio also won't work when it's switched on, because they mess up the channels. There we are, guys. Hope that helps.